Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way podcast in conversation with Irena Dzisiewska. My name's Liz Webb, and for this episode I am delighted to be joined by the Director of Sport at Millfield, Rena. Good morning, Rena.
Hi.
How are you today? Good?
Wonderful, yeah,
Good.
Excited.
So it's a big job, Director of Sport at Millfield, and you've been in post for over a year now. What has struck you the most about Millfield since stepping into the role?
Oh, that's a toughie. It is interesting. It does not feel like a school. It has got a real university feel, I think, in terms of the way the campus is. But what has really struck me is the passion of the coaches. I think they're just so passionate about what they want to achieve and how dedicated they are. And maybe the second one is the students. I think disruptive sounds negative, and that was the thing that attracted me here. But I think they are just so willing to ask the questions, and it's a really lovely environment to be in.
And you've come to Millfield from a senior leadership role in the army. That's quite unusual in an independent school, and lots of people find that really interesting. Tell us about the coolest thing that you've done that you're allowed to talk about.
Coolest thing? I always said in the army I wouldn't leave until I had a week where I hadn't done something cool, and I had some really amazing experiences. In my early days, the deployments were in the Balkans, in Bosnia and Kosovo, and then as I got more senior, deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, and with the United Nations over in Mali. What were the coolest things I did? My regimental command, so I had about 700 in my command that were both regular and reserve, was of an EOD unit. So I think we think of that as bomb disposal, and I had to do the bomb disposal course for conventional munitions disposal before I did it, and I found that really tough, but I suppose that could be construed as really cool. But I think it was the travelling. I think seeing some really interesting people in some really interesting countries and realising that most problems are not that easy to solve.
That sounds really interesting. So what elements of your military experience do you think are the most valuable in leading sport here?
It's really interesting because I think when I was both applying for the job and when people have asked me, I've thought about this quite a lot because I was trying to justify it, not just to the school to hire me, but I think to myself as I change role. But I think that the aims aren't really that dissimilar. If you take away the fighting bit, you are trying to make people the best they can be, which is what what the military slogan used to be the best in the army. And I think you have got all sorts of people here from all sorts of environments, and you are essentially trying to get a large body of the staff to get people to move in the same direction, which is challenging in a school this size, and you're doing it in order to make the individuals at the centre of that, those students, the very best they can be, which is the Millfield Be Brilliant. So no, I think there are some really big overlaps and parallels between the two.
And is there anything you miss about military life and anything new that you've discovered here that's different?
What do I miss? Not the travel. I think I was done with travel by the end of my 27 years. So let me come back to that. What do I think I didn't expect, which is here? I think it is the unrelenting, I've already said the passion, but people are so dedicated in a way that I thought nothing could outdo the army or the military, but people are just so dedicated to making sure they do a good job here. Doesn't mean it all goes brilliantly all the time, but I think they're just dedicated to make sure they do something. So, yeah, I'm going to come back to you by the end of the podcast on what I miss.
And Millfield's widely recognised for sporting excellence, and you've spoken previously about how sport affects success in life and has long-lasting values for life. What do you think Millfield does differently that sets it apart from other schools?
Well, the way that I brief when parents come round is I talk about excellence, breadth and holistic approach. And yes, a lot of other schools could say that, but I think our breadth is crazy. We've got up to 30 sports that we do over the summer. And in that, I think it gives the opportunity for children between 14 and 18, where they're growing not just physically but psychologically, they've got an ability to be able to just take time out, do another sport, to be able to change sport entirely because they just haven't really found what sport suits them. So I think the breadth is one that is really different. It is fantastic that we have been the best sports school in the country for 12 out of the last 13 years. But I think the difference about Millfield is recognising the psychological and the social elements of sport, because for me that is what makes the difference. So thinking about how people are growing psychologically and thinking about socially what makes it important. It doesn't sound like the critical bit of sport, but it is definitely the bit that gives you the additional added value, or whatever you want to say, that makes you change from being an average sports person to a brilliant sports person.
And you've challenged yourself personally across many sports, from Premiership rugby to numerous endurance events during your lifetime. How has your own sporting journey shaped your views on youth sport and development?
Yeah, I think as a woman in sport, I've done lots of talks and in the army about, what's it like to be a female leader, or what's it like to do whatever. And I think the line that I've always come out with at the end of that is the Nike slogan, just do it. I think there is something about youth approach to life, that we've all been through, we've all been young kids, that is about confidence. So I think there is something about just doing things. What has sport done for me in life? Again, I'll go back to Ted Lasso and his, the footballer Danny, who's always saying football is life. For me, sport is life. It teaches you teamwork, determination, self-control, all the things that sort of help you get through life. So I'm going to go with resilience. It's taught me how to get back up when I've failed. It's about teamwork, and it's allowing me to work with people. And actually, it created an amazing social circle for me, which I think is really important in finding your tribe. I think I found my tribe in life through sport, and as I've changed sport, I've found different tribes that I'm still closely associated with.
And that sounds similar to experiences of students here, where they perhaps might come in on one sport, try some different sports, go off on a different direction. So I think there's probably some links there to what you're talking about, to what we try and offer here at Millfield.
And I think, Liz, there's something about deciding. There's something about having the freedom to choose. And Millfield is different because it is so big, and there are, we are trying to, as people get older, get them to take more control of their sports journey, but actually that's just a parallel for life. How do you make decisions? What do you do when you fail? How do you control your emotions? And actually that choice of your sport is one that I think is fundamental to that. So, no, I'm with you.
Exactly. And so you've been here for just over a year. What have you been most keen to understand or review in your time spent here so far?
I've already touched on the decision making. For me, I am intrigued by the overall, the overall development. I hate using the word holistic, but it is about cognitively, what is the cognitive approach to learning, which has got something interesting in sport? How do we contribute? How do we work with the pastoral team, with the co-curricular team, with the academic team to make sure that that student is developing as a whole being? So that intrigues me, and I really, really like to do something with that. Maybe it's because I'm not a sports coach, so I'm not trying to get involved in their individual sports too much, but trying to extract that from them. But if I was going to have a second, and I can't help it every time, it's about communication. So whenever anything goes wrong or we could do better, the first thing I always ask is, where's it written down and where have we told somebody? Because be it parents, be it staff, be it the student, we've got to get better at communicating.
Fantastic. And you've already talked about being a woman in sport. You're the first female director of sport at Millfield. How important is that visibility for young women here? And do you think it brings a different perspective to the role?
I think I have always had people say you can't be what you can't see. So I think there is something about having somebody in a position of authority on any sort of SLT. And for me, having come from the army, obviously there's a lot more women in this school in senior leadership than I have seen in the military. So it's wonderful for me. And I think there's probably a message to the industry. I can't even tell you the number of people who've been in touch with me to talk about being the first female director. That's very difficult for me to have a view on because I am who I am, and I suppose it is what it is. But I think that's important. I think what does it bring to the role? Again, probably want to ask my team, not me or the students. I'm not sure it's about me being a woman. What are women supposed to be? Well, women are supposed to be more empathetic, and we are supposed to be able to multitask. I think it's a complete fallacy. And they're supposed to be able to, what do we say? If we were hunters and gatherers and we are gathering, then we can not just sense things earlier, but we can plan better. So if I was going to aspire to be a better human being and a better woman, I'd be more empathetic and I'd be able to plan better for where we want to go. But whether that is me, they're things I probably live up to rather than truly live.
When you speak to students, what do you hope that they say about their experience of sport at Millfield that makes you think, yes, we are getting this right?
I'm going back to that cognitive bit again. So what's the first thing that I want people to say? I want them to say they're enjoying it, because I think fun has got to be at the heart of sport. But what, on reflection, I want them to think about is it's generally just made them a better person. Because as much as we have had these amazing people who are doing amazing things regionally, nationally or internationally, they need to leave here being better able to navigate life. And sport is one thing that helps them do it. So I hope that they have learned to plan better, they've made some firm friends for life, they've got teamwork, and that they just will have a lifelong relationship with sport. And I appreciate that probably doesn't sing with what people think of Millfield, that we're striving for glory, but you get all those things right and you'll be successful in whatever you want to do. It's about making choices, and that's the most difficult thing for anybody to do in life.
Yeah, and I've heard you say before about if you get those things right, then actually the success part comes second to what you're doing in terms of character building and resilience and problem solving and all those things. They all come together, and actually we do have a lot of success here at Millfield, but it's almost secondary to the bit that we're trying to teach the students in terms of life lessons.
No, I totally agree. And as you know, I'm all over the slogan of success always comes second. But I think there's lots of different ways that's been said in lots of different sports. Follow the process, be student-led. It's very difficult for people to do. And I think when you say that, it sounds like you're saying winning in life or succeeding isn't important. But, we've done loads of surveys here about what does brilliant sport mean. And it blows my mind, and I almost want to record these sessions and play them back to people to say, when those successful people, be they staff or be they students, are talking about what success is, they very rarely talk about the winning. And it's not because winning isn't a thrill, it's that success is about the journey. It's not about where you get to. And if you're doing a great journey, where you want to go might not be where you ultimately end up and where you're meant to end up. So you've got to be a little bit, think more broadly, I think.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a bit before about the different levels and abilities that our students here have. How do we ensure that Millfield caters for all those different levels of ability and interest?
Inclusivity is one of the things that we talk about as the culture, the four sort of parts of culture in the sporting programme. And for me, inclusivity is, well, not for me, for the department, but definitely an important driver is that we go all the way from your recreational sports person all the way through to your performance sports person. How do we do it? Well, we try and build that into the programme so that we can provide the different ranges. In the summer, when we note people are really focused on exams and they know they need a release valve, we've got a bunch of recreational sports. So whilst we have definitely got 30 sports, we have got 17 that have got heads of, and some of the other 13 are a bit more recreational. But in those recreational groups, we still find people who are going on to do things nationally. Trampolining, badminton are really good examples. We try and build programmes that allow that, because even if you are an amazing sports person, you might want to do something recreationally and just enjoy it.
And we're first and foremost a school, and balancing academics, which are front and centre of what we're doing here, co-curricular life and sport can be demanding. How important is that balance, do you think? And how can schools best support young people to manage it well?
Yeah, it's so critical, and I think we recently did a survey with students on a bunch of different questions, and one of them was, what would you change if you could do more? And it was really astounding that what came out loud and clear is more training, more games, more everything, and we
more
know
time in the day,
and we know they are doing an awful lot. So I'm going to give a reasonably glib answer, which is, I think goes back to something I said earlier. But when they are, what do we do when they're young? We try and help them manage that. So we restrict the programme during year 9, and manage is probably a better word, so that they are not burning themselves out. So from a physical and a psychological perspective, we don't want them to get injured, ever really, when they're at school. During that student journey, because we know that will take them out for such a long time. And psychologically, we want to help them help themselves. So we want them to get to the stage where by the time they leave here, they are able to understand what good training looks like. They're able to plan their day. And I mean plan their day not just by sport, by knowing how much they need to study versus how much they need to be with their friends and not think about anything, or how much they want to do sport. And wouldn't we all have loved that, going into university and doing it properly? But if we can at least give them the ability to know how to start to do that, then we should. So how do we do it? We help them quite a lot in year 9 and year 10, and then as they get further on, we want to be giving them more tools and almost empowering their husbands to empower them, so that the house parents are helping them move forward to plan better.
And what do you think is changing in the world of youth sport development? That's a very big question. But how should schools respond, do you think?
As is no secret, this is a new world for me in terms of the sector of schools, but sport isn't a new sector to me because I've had a lifelong relationship with it. What do I notice coming in and looking at the way that organisations are doing things, or other directors of sport speaking to me? I think there's quite a lot of control, and I think that's a bit... I don't like the way that is going in sport, so I think you have to recognise that sport is a time where people have a release valve. You have to recognise that it's a time of freedom where they may express things they're not expressing somewhere else. It's a time where they can fail. So I would much rather that they're failing on a rugby pitch or on a tennis court than they are failing at a critical exam. So I think we need to give more freedom to sport, and yes, we put some boundaries in there, but you want to break down those boundaries as much as you can in sport. That's one. And the 2 is fun. And I think this sounds like it isn't the way that Millfield goes, but my goodness, we should be having fun during sport. Having come from a very serious profession, there is always space for humour, and you know, the military humour is well known, but you should be able to have fun. And if you're not enjoying doing sport, and I said it earlier, we want people to have a lifelong relationship with it. It's a release valve, it's a time to fail, it's a time to enjoy life and celebrate life. And I fear that the industry and arguably some schools are very focused on winning. And yes, that's important, but they're children, and they should be enjoying it. The winning will come, success always comes second. Look after the process and results will follow. All those things, just relax a little. This is sport.
And on that note, finally, what would be your 3 takeaways for our listeners about sport at Millfield under your leadership?
I think understand our approach, understand me, understand what our sports department is giving. I say this as somebody who, before I even applied for the job, I listened to the podcasts that were on this website, because I think they're really important. So take the time to understand us as a department and what we offer. Know your coach. So no matter what we say of this is our philosophy as a sport department, your coach for your sport is really important. So if you're a golfer, take the time to speak to Karen and Stu and understand what they offer and see whether you work. This is a relationship. Is the chemistry right? And third is, if you're here or if you think something isn't right, talk to us early, because us understanding things where you've got a problem or a concern is much easier to deal with at the beginning than it is at the end. When it's become a problem. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rena. This has been the Millfield Way podcast in conversation with Irena Dzisiewska. Thank you and goodbye.